Welcome to the Am I Free to Go podcast, where the Constitution isn't just paper, it's ammo. I'm your host, Soundrone with Soundbite News Media, and here we don't just talk about your rights, we lock, load, and defend them. We expose censorship, spotlight real amendment battles, and bring you the stories the mainstream's too scared to touch. So whether you're behind a mic, behind a badge, or behind enemy lines on social media, this is your front line in the fight for free speech. Strap in, speak up, and never ask permission, because around here, we know the truth. You are free to go. Episode number 007, Reporting Official Misconduct and Filing Complaints, is what you do after a badge and gun encounter goes sideways. Filing a complaint helps hold public officials accountable without needing a courtroom or a megaphone. We'll walk you through how to do it and where to send it so it doesn't end up in a shredder. Think of it as your official "I saw what you did" form.
Okay, let's unpack this. You shared a stack of sources here, covering something absolutely vital, but often really tough to navigate.
Yeah.
How to report misconduct by people in government power. We're primarily talking about law enforcement, but also, judges and attorneys.
It is a complicated landscape for sure, and these sources really show just how many different doors there are to potentially knock on. We've got, everything from legal aid explainers and official guides from places like the Department of Justice, the NYC Civilian Complaint Review Board, to state-specific rules for judges and lawyers, and even some discussion threads that give a sense of real-world experiences.
Exactly. So our mission for this deep dive is to make sense of all that for you. We're going to try and guide you through the different avenues these sources lay out, help define what misconduct even means in these specific contexts according to the material, and just give you the clearest possible picture of what these processes involve, sticking strictly to what's in front of us here.
Right. It's about pulling out those key terms, the procedures, and hopefully the most practical takeaways.
Think of it as getting maybe a map to the system's design for seeking accountability when you believe something has gone wrong.
Yeah, a map is a good way to put it.
So, diving right into the foundation according to these sources, we start with civil rights. The material defines these as fundamental rights citizens have to ensure political and social freedom and equality.
And right away, your sources highlight a significant problem. Police harassment and abuse are described as, a nationwide issue. They apparently contribute to mental and physical injury and, importantly, impact jail and prison populations.
And the sources don't just state the problem, they actually point to some contributing factors. Things like failure to adequately train officers, the presence of racial profiling, and a perceived lack of accountability.
Which brings us to why reporting matters, according to this material anyway. It can help identify individuals who are problematic, the bad apples idea. It can pressure agencies to change behavior that's inappropriate or even illegal. And, it contributes to that broader goal of accountability.
The sources even include a specific example from the Southern Center for Human Rights material, the case of Sarah Jackson in Stewart County, Georgia. She was apparently pepper sprayed during a stop. And Ms. Jackson didn't just let it go. She got a petition going, gathered over 400 signatures, obtained the incident report, and really pushed local officials.
And the outcome?
The outcome, according to the source, the officer was removed from the police department. It's presented as a powerful illustration that, based on this material, reporting can actually lead to action.
That example really underscores the point. But as you mentioned, there isn't just one single place to report every kind of problem. The material makes it really clear it depends heavily on who committed the alleged misconduct and what kind it was.
Right. The sources cover ways to report officials in several categories. Police and law enforcement, that's local, state, and federal. Then judges, state and federal. Attorneys, mainly at the state level here, and also other federal executive and legislative branch officials.
Got it. So let's maybe start with what seems to be the most detailed area in your sources, reporting police misconduct at the local and state levels.
Okay. Well, the most direct path mentioned, according to this material, is often starting right at the local level. You can file a complaint directly with the police chief or their internal affairs, or sometimes called professional standards divisions.
And the sources say this is often free and might involve interviews, either phone or in person.
Yeah, but here's a key insight flagged up in these sources. While reporting internally is an option, the material also acknowledges the potential perception, that this feels like the police investigating themselves.
Right, that concern definitely comes across.
So what about outside the police department itself? Is that covered?
It is. That's where civilian review boards, or CRBs, come in, according to the material. These exist in some cities and are described as independent citizen bodies, specifically designed to take and investigate complaints against the police.
Okay, and the NYC Civilian Complaint Review Board, the CCRB, is used as a detailed example in your sources.
Yes, quite detailed. They explain you can file a complaint with the CCRB in multiple ways online, by phone, mail, in person, or even, interestingly, via social media.
Wow, okay. And the process?
Well, as described by the CCRB source, it starts with an intake unit checking if they actually have jurisdiction.
Makes sense.
If they do, a really crucial step is giving a detailed statement. You can do this by phone, virtually, or in person. What stands out as important from the source is what details to bring. Time, date, location, descriptions of officers.
Right.
And even if you don't have a name or badge number, they say they can often identify officers using NYPD records. Also, any witnesses, and importantly, any evidence you have: paperwork, photos, video. You'll apparently sign a form verifying your statement is true.
The source also mentions that sometimes mediation is offered as an alternative.
Right. If it goes to investigation, though, the investigator gathers evidence. They might visit the scene, look for cameras or witnesses, collect physical evidence.
And they have subpoena power.
Yes. The CCRB source says they have subpoena power, which means they can legally obtain records, including medical records, with your permission, of course, and internal NYPD documents like body camera footage, roll calls, that sort of thing.
Okay, so they can compel evidence.
Seems so. And they interview everyone involved, the officer the complaint is against, and any witnesses. Interestingly, the source notes NYPD officers are actually required to appear and answer truthfully during a CCRB investigation.
Wow. Hey,
Yeah.
Required to appear. And what happens at the end of the investigation?
According to the source, it goes to a board panel or the full board for a vote on the outcome. The findings can be substantiated, which means they found evidence of misconduct. Or other findings like within NYPD guidelines, unfounded, officer unidentified, or sometimes unable to determine.
If an allegation is substantiated, the board makes a disciplinary recommendation. But here's another important point flagged. The police commissioner has the final authority on discipline.
Ah, right. So the recommendation goes up, but the decision rests higher.
Exactly. The source mentions a disciplinary matrix that guides recommendations, but ultimately the commissioner makes the call.
And for the really serious misconduct, what they call charges and specifications, the case goes to an administrative prosecution unit for a trial before an NYPD trial commissioner.
Trial, okay.
Yeah, though officers can also choose a trial for lower level discipline. And again, the commissioner has the final say on outcomes after the trial, including pleas or penalties.
So beyond these formal complaint systems, the sources also suggest other, maybe more community-based local avenues you can explore.
They do. Attending public meetings like city council, county commissioner, or public safety meetings is presented as a way to voice concerns directly. The rationale given is that these are elected officials funded by your taxes.
Makes sense.
Starting a petition and presenting it is another tactic mentioned.
Like in that Sarah Jackson example.
Exactly. And contacting your elected representatives can help inform legislators about issues and potentially push for policy changes, like addressing racial profiling or maybe laws about hiring officers.
And this is fascinating. Monitoring courtrooms is suggested as a way to gain insight into how local police officers bring charges and, their general arrest practices, just observing.
Yeah, boots on the ground research, essentially. Now, shifting gears a bit, the sources dive into another significant pathway: civil lawsuits.
Right.
The material explains you can sue a government employee for violating your civil rights, often using a specific federal law called 42 U.S.C. Section 1983, sometimes just called a 1983 lawsuit. This law apparently comes from the Civil Rights Act of 1871.
Okay, so for this kind of lawsuit, what's the core requirement? According to the sources, what do you have to show?
You need to show the official acted under the color of state law. This essentially means they were misusing the authority they had because of their government position. It wasn't just a personal act.
Got it. Misuse of power.
Yeah.
And the process.
Well, the sources describe it generally involving talking to an attorney, gathering your facts and evidence, and then drafting a formal complaint. This complaint names everyone involved, you as the plaintiff, the official, as defendants, and clearly states the facts of what happened, how your rights were violated, and what you're asking for, which is usually damages.
Damages. Okay, what kind are mentioned?
The material lists a few types. Compensatory damages to cover your actual losses, like medical bills or lost wages.
Okay.
Punitive damages, which are meant to punish the official for particularly bad behavior, malicious or reckless conduct. And nominal damages if your rights were violated, but maybe there wasn't a significant monetary loss. You can also ask for an injunction that's a court order telling someone to do, or, not do something like forbidding a specific police tactic.
So once the lawsuit is filed, what might the other side, the defendants, do?
The sources mention defendants often filing pretrial motions to try and get the case dismissed early. One type is a motion arguing your complaint just doesn't state a valid legal claim based on the law itself.
Like, even if it's true, it's not illegal.
Sort of, yeah. Another common one is a motion for summary judgment. Here, they argue that even if everything you say is true, it still doesn't add up to a legal violation as a matter of law.
Okay.
A key point here from the source is that when deciding on summary judgment, the judge has to assume your version of the facts is true for the purpose of that motion.
Okay, that makes sense. And what about qualified immunity? I feel like I hear that term a lot in these kinds of discussions.
Yes, that's a really significant defense mentioned in the sources, particularly for police officers in these 1983 lawsuits. A judge might grant qualified immunity and dismiss the case if they find the officer's actions were, quote, objectively reasonable based on how things looked to the officer at the time.
At the time, okay.
And if those actions didn't violate rights that were clearly established by prior court decisions, especially if there aren't really similar prior cases on the books.
So proving a right was clearly established sounds like it could be a real hurdle.
It can be, according to the discussion in the source material. It's a crucial concept to understand if you're considering this path. It can stop a case before it even gets to trial.
Okay. And how does a civil trial itself compare to a criminal one? Are there differences?
The sources point out some key differences. The standard of proof is lower in civil cases. It's preponderance of the evidence, meaning just more likely than not.
Compared to beyond a reasonable doubt?
Exactly. Much higher bar in criminal cases. Also, civil juries can sometimes be smaller than 12 people, and while some places require unanimous verdicts, like Illinois in federal court apparently, others may not. You also might have the option of a bench trial, where just the judge decides the facts and the law instead of a jury.
And the sources note settlement is possible before trial.
Very common, yeah.
And even after a trial, win or lose, it might not be over because of appeals.
Right. And a super practical point highlighted across a couple of sources is that statutes of limitations apply. There's a time limit for filing your lawsuit.
Crucial.
Absolutely crucial. For example, the sources mention a 2-year limit for Section 1983 claims in Georgia and Alabama, but state laws can vary, and there might be other notice requirements too. This is general info from the sources, definitely not legal advice, but it's vital to be aware of that clock ticking.
Okay, so we've looked at local and state police reporting and civil lawsuits. Let's shift now to the federal level. How does the U.S. Department of Justice, the DOJ, fit into this picture according to your sources?
Well, the sources show the DOJ has a major role addressing police misconduct through specific federal laws. They investigate actions by officers at all levels, state, county, local, and even federal officers themselves.
And the sources make a clear distinction in how the DOJ operates, right? Criminal versus civil enforcement?
Exactly. That's a key takeaway. In criminal cases, the DOJ brings the case against the individual accused officer or person. The standard of proof is that high, beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right.
And the goal is essentially punishment for past actions, things like fines or imprisonment.
And the sources give examples of the specific federal criminal laws involved, like 18 U.S.C. Section 241 and 242. These cover things like willfully depriving someone of their rights under color of law. Think excessive force, false arrests, theft, fabricating evidence.
Serious stuff.
Very serious. But here's a critical nugget from the sources. There is no private right of action under these specific criminal statutes.
That's a really important point for you, the listener, to grasp. What it means is you, as an individual, can't personally file a lawsuit based on these particular criminal laws, even if something awful happened. Only the federal government, the DOJ, can bring those charges.
Got it. So they enforce it, but you can't sue based on it. What about the DOJ's civil enforcement side then? How does that work?
In civil cases, the sources say the DOJ brings the case against a governmental authority or law enforcement agency, so the entity itself, not necessarily just the individual officer.
Okay, the system, not just the person.
Kind of, yeah. The standard of proof is lower here, just preponderance of the evidence. And the goal is different too. It's more about correcting the agency's policies and practices that allowed misconduct to happen, and sometimes providing relief for individuals affected by those practices.
The sources list several key federal civil statutes the DOJ enforces. First, there's what's called the police misconduct provision. That's 34 U.S.C. section 2601.
Yes, and what's key about this one, according to the material, is it addresses a pattern or practice of misconduct by an agency, not just a single, isolated incident.
A pattern or practice. Okay.
And the remedies are limited to injunctive relief, basically, court orders forcing policy changes or ending the bad behavior. Crucially, like those criminal laws we just discussed, there is no private right of action here either. Only the DOJ can file a lawsuit under this specific statute to address a pattern of problems within an agency.
Okay, so again, the feds can use it to try and clean up an agency's act, but you, as an individual, can't use this particular law to sue for, say, personal damages.
That seems to be the takeaway from the source.
What other civil laws does the DOJ enforce that do allow individuals to take action?
Your sources mention Title VI of the Civil Rights Act and something called the OJP Program Statute. These prohibit discrimination based on protected characteristics like race, color, national origin, sex, or religion by agencies that receive funding from the DOJ.
Okay, discrimination by agencies getting federal money.
Right. And these laws do cover individual incidents and patterns of discrimination.
And here's where it gets different for individuals, right?
Exactly. Under these laws, individuals do generally have a private right of action. You can file your own lawsuit alleging discrimination. The material notes, though, a potential caveat. You might need to file a complaint with the DOJ first to, quote, exhaust administrative remedies if you're planning to sue in federal court under that OJP statute specifically.
Interesting details. So, different avenues, different procedural rules. What about disability discrimination? Is that covered?
Yes. The sources cover Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. Both prohibit discrimination based on disability.
How do they differ, according to the material?
Well, the ADA, specifically Title II, applies broadly to all state and local government activities, regardless of whether they get DOJ funds. Section 504 applies more specifically to agencies receiving DOJ funds and federal agencies themselves.
And they cover things like discriminatory treatment during law enforcement interactions, like arrests or questioning.
Yes, the sources mention things like discrimination in interrogating witnesses, providing emergency services, or making arrests, among other law enforcement activities.
And here's another area where individuals do have a private right of action, according to the material. You can file your own lawsuit under both the ADA and Section 504.
Correct. And a key point here, unlike potentially with that OJP statute we mentioned, the sources indicate there is no requirement to file a complaint with the DOJ first before suing under these disability rights laws. You can apparently go straight to court.
That distinction is really helpful. It really highlights how understanding the specific law involved is absolutely key to knowing your options and the right steps to take.
Definitely.
So if you do want to bring something to the attention of the DOJ, maybe you report potential criminal conduct or civil rights violations, how do the sources say you should actually do it?
Well, for criminal allegations against officers, the typical path suggested is contacting the local FBI field office or the U.S. Attorney's Office for your district.
Okay.
For civil allegations, particularly discrimination claims or those pattern or practice issues, the sources direct you to civilrights.justice.gov. That's the website for the DOJ's Civil Rights Division. They handle reports, often through an online form available there.
Okay, that covers DOJ and police pretty thoroughly.
Yeah.
What about reporting misconduct by other types of federal employees? Not law enforcement, but maybe someone in an agency or Congress. The sources bring up the U.S. Office of Government Ethics, or OGE.
Yes, and the OGE source is very clear about their role. They themselves do not handle complaints, investigate, or prosecute ethical misconduct. Think of them more as a switchboard operator.
Ah, like a referral service for ethics complaints?
Exactly. According to the OGE material, if you have a complaint about an executive branch employee, someone working in a federal agency, like, say, the Department of Agriculture or Education, you typically report it to the Inspector General, IG, of that specific agency. Most agencies have one. They do list specific offices for certain groups, like DOJ attorneys or Bureau of Prisons employees.
Okay, so the IG within the agency itself. And for those in Congress, senators or representatives.
For legislative branch officials, the OGE source says to report to bodies like the Senate Select Committee on Ethics, the Independent Office of Congressional Ethics, OCE, or the House Committee on Ethics, depending on who it involves.
What about federal judges? If you think a federal judge acted improperly.
For misconduct by a U.S. district judge, the OGE directs you to send complaints to the clerk of the U.S. Court of Appeals in that judge's specific geographic circuit.
Okay, a different path for judges. And finally, what about things like violations of the Hatch Act, improper political activity by federal employees, or whistleblower reports?
Those, according to the OGE source, go to a separate agency called the Office of Special Counsel, or OSC.
Wow. So depending on who the federal official is and what branch they're in, you're potentially going to a completely different watchdog agency.
Precisely. It really reinforces that need to know who was involved and their position to figure out the right place to even start.
Let's look now at reporting misconduct by other officials back at the state level, beyond police. We can use the California examples provided in your sources. What about state judges?
Okay, so for California state judges, the body mentioned is the Commission on Judicial Performance, or CJP. The material states complaints must be in writing. You can use their online form, a printable one they provide, or just send a formal letter.
And their jurisdiction. Who can they actually investigate based on these sources?
They cover judges in the state superior courts, the courts of appeal, and the state Supreme Court. Also former judges, but only for conduct that happened while they were still on the bench.
Okay.
They apparently share authority over court commissioners and referees, but importantly, the source says you must file a complaint with the local court first regarding those individuals before the CJP gets involved.
Good to know. Who do they not cover?
The CJP source explicitly says they do not cover federal judges, that's the federal system we just talked about, or temporary judges, sometimes called judges pro tem.
Got it. So what kind of information is crucial when you make that written complaint to the CJP?
The source really stresses being detailed and specific. Include the judge's name, the court, case information if it's related to a specific case, the dates of the alleged misconduct, and a specific detailed description of what the judge actually did or said. They explicitly state not to just provide conclusions like the judge was unfair, but the concrete facts that led you to that conclusion.
Show, don't just tell.
Exactly. Provide any relevant documents, audio, or video if you happen to have it.
And here's a major point that really stood out from that CJP source. Complaining about a judge's ruling or decision is not considered misconduct.
Absolutely critical point. The CJP source is very clear. The commission is not an appellate court. They cannot change a judge's legal decision or verdict. Your complaint needs to be about the judge's behavior or conduct.
Like how they treated people or conflicts of interest.
Right. Misconduct examples they do look at include things like rude or abusive treatment, failing to disqualify themselves when there's a conflict, improperly receiving information about a case outside the courtroom without the parties present, abusing their power regarding contempt or sanctions, causing unreasonable delay, or certain conduct outside of court, like criminal activity or improperly using their judicial authority.
Okay, so it's squarely focused on conduct, not legal error. What's the CJP process like after you file a complaint?
The complaint is acknowledged, then it's reviewed internally to see if an investigation is even warranted based on the allegations. The CJP source mentions that staff only contact the judge after an investigation is formally authorized by the commission.
And confidentiality.
Complaints and investigations are generally confidential, according to the source. They only become public if the commission decides to file formal charges against the judge. The timing varies depending on the case.
And you, the complainant, are eventually notified.
Yes, the source says the complainant is notified of the final decision, whether the case is simply closed, results in some sort of private corrective action like a warning, or leads to public discipline against the judge. But they stress they cannot give you legal advice.
So, mostly confidential, unless it escalates to a serious public stage. Okay, what about attorneys in California? Your sources also cover the state bar process for lawyer misconduct.
Yes, Similar idea. You file a written complaint with the state bar. They have online forms and PDFs available, even in multiple languages according to the source.
Who can file?
Pretty much anyone. Clients, members of the public, courts, other lawyers, and they even accept anonymous complaints.
Okay. And the process there, does it mirror the judicial one?
Somewhat. If you're not anonymous, you get a confirmation of receipt. Then, a state bar attorney reviews the complaint to see if it alleges enough facts to suggest a potential ethical violation. They might ask you for more documents at this stage.
If it seems like there's something there, they investigate.
Right. If a potential violation is alleged, it gets investigated. And similar to the CJP, the complaints and investigations are generally kept confidential.
Generally confidential. Are there exceptions?
Yes. The source notes that limited public disclosure might be possible under specific rules, like maybe confirming that a complaint exists, or providing a very brief summary or the current status, but it sounds restricted.
Now, here's a part that might be tricky for complainants. The source says the lawyer you complained about must be informed of the allegations, and that usually means revealing your identity as the complainant.
That's a key point and potentially uncomfortable, especially if you were the client. They say they generally need to disclose your identity to establish that attorney-client confidentiality is waived, but only for the purpose of allowing the bar to investigate the complaint.
Okay, that makes sense procedurally, but definitely something to be aware of. What happens if the investigation doesn't find evidence of a serious violation? Does it just get dropped?
Not necessarily. The sources state that for less serious matters, outcomes can include things like a warning letter, diversion into an ethics program, or something called an agreement in lieu of discipline, ALD. It's important to note that the state bar source explicitly says these outcomes are not considered formal discipline on the lawyer's record.
But if formal charges are filed by the bar?
Then the case becomes public record and goes before an independent state bar court.
A separate court just for lawyer discipline?
Apparently so. And the outcomes from that court can range from dismissal to public admonishment or reproval, which are considered discipline, all the way up to recommending suspension or even disbarment to the state's highest court.
And who makes the final call on suspension or disbarment?
The source says the California Supreme Court has the final authority on suspending or disbarring an attorney.
Okay. The sources also mentioned something called the Client Security Fund. What's that?
That's presented as a fund that might be able to help clients recover money they lost, specifically due to an attorney's dishonest conduct, like theft. But crucially, you generally have to file a complaint with the state bar first to even be eligible to apply to that fund.
So the complaint process is step one for that too.
Seems like it. And they also note that if the conduct involves potential crimes, the state bar might refer the matter to law enforcement as well.
Wow. Okay, that is a lot of different systems, different agencies, different rules, different potential outcomes depending on who the official is and where they work.
It really is quite a web.
So, given all these potential pathways, what are some practical tips and considerations that seem to come up consistently across these different sources? What should you keep in mind?
Yeah, this section in your material, particularly drawing from the ACLU info and also that Reddit discussion you included, has some really valuable sort of practical advice. First, thinking about during an incident where you feel your rights are being violated. The ACLU source advises staying calm, being polite, definitely not interfering or obstructing the officials, and importantly, do not lie or give false documents.
Seems like sound advice.
Yeah.
And know your rights.
Absolutely. The ACLU material emphasizes stating your right to remain silent out loud, refusing consent to searches, though it clarifies you shouldn't physically resist if police proceed anyway.
Right.
Asking, am I free to leave? And asking for a lawyer immediately if you are arrested. They also suggest having important phone numbers memorized or readily available for family or contacts, just in case.
What about after the incident happens? What's the advice then?
The sources are pretty clear. Don't try to argue or challenge alleged police misconduct on the street. That's usually not the time or place.
Okay.
Instead, focus immediately on remembering and writing down the details. Time, date, exact location, officer names, badge numbers, car numbers as possible, and which agency they belong to.
Details, details, details.
Yes. Get contact information for any witnesses if you can. If you're injured, the advice is to seek medical attention first, then photograph your injuries as soon as possible.
Yeah.
And gather any physical evidence you have, any paperwork you were given, photos you took, videos.
Okay, collect everything. And when it comes to filing the actual complaint with one of these agencies we've discussed,
The sources consistently recommend filing a written complaint whenever possible. Seems more formal and creates a record.
Right.
And make sure you're filing with the appropriate agency based on who is involved, police, judge, federal employee, etc., and the type of misconduct alleged.
Use the right door, basically.
Exactly. The ACLU and state bar sources also mention that anonymous complaints are often accepted, which is important for people to know if they fear retaliation.
And timing seems important too, right? We talked about statutes of limitation.
Yes, file promptly. Those statutes of limitations for lawsuits are a major reason. The Reddit discussion you included also suggests filing right away if you're considering pursuing criminal charges related to the incident. Also, just a practical note from the Southern Center for Human Rights material, requesting official records, like an officer's employment history or specific incident reports, might involve paying fees for copies or the staff time spent finding them.
Good to know. What should someone realistically expect after they file a complaint? Will they get constant updates?
Probably not constant updates. Based on the sources, especially that Reddit discussion, the investigation will likely involve contacting everyone involved, you, the official, witnesses, to get their perspective.
Right.
The process itself can take significant time. The CJP and DOJ materials explicitly mention potential delays. You'll likely be notified of the final outcome eventually.
Okay.
But you probably won't receive, weekly progress reports during the investigation itself. Confidentiality rules often limit that.
And if your report does lead to a criminal case being filed by prosecutors?
That's a key point from the Reddit discussion. You might then be required to testify in court as a witness.
Okay. That thread also touches on just filing an incident report sometimes, if that option exists, which might just keep something on file without necessarily triggering a full formal investigation. Though it suggests this isn't usually the recommended path if you're alleging serious criminal action by an official.
Right. Seems like more of a documentation step in some cases.
And finally, it seems really important to understand the inherent limitations of these systems based on the sources.
Absolutely. The DOJ source is clear. They don't act as your personal lawyer. They represent the interests of the United States government.
Right.
And as we discussed with the CJP example for judges, reporting what you believe is a judge's ruling error to a conduct commission is not going to change the ruling itself. They deal with conduct, not appeals.
So there you have it, a deep dive into the many, many different mechanisms available for reporting misconduct by government officials, all derived directly from the stack of sources you brought us today.
Yeah, we've seen that there are multiple paths. You've got everything from internal police investigations and civilian review boards to filing civil lawsuits under laws like Section 1983 or federal discrimination statutes, and then filing specific complaints with federal agencies like the DOJ or state-level bodies like judicial conduct commissions or state bar associations for lawyers. It really does hammer home the importance of, knowing your rights during an encounter, documenting everything meticulously afterwards, and then really understanding where to direct your complaint based on who is involved and the specific nature of the alleged misconduct. Getting it to the right place seems key.
Definitely. And while the processes themselves can clearly be complex, often slow, and the outcomes vary really greatly, anything from systemic policy changes or official discipline down to financial awards in a lawsuit, or sometimes maybe just creating a formal record of the complaint.
Right.
These systems, as outlined in your sources, are essentially the established means society has set up for seeking accountability from those who wield government power.
Thanks for tuning in to the Am I Free to Go podcast. Support the show by checking out our First Amendment gear, wear your rights proudly, and help us keep creating content like this. You can also join us on Patreon for access to uncut videos, outtakes, bloopers, and exclusive audio-only episodes. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell across all our channels. All links are in the description. And most importantly, we love reading your comments. Drop your ideas below and you might hear your suggestion in a future episode.